pilots of the 415th Night Fighter Squadron reported a new enemy. It was not German, it was not Japanese, and it moved faster than any aircraft ever built. You are 20,000 feet above the Rhine Valley, encased in the rattling metal of a P-61 Black Widow. It is freezing. The darkness outside is absolute. Suddenly, your wingman's voice crackles through the radio. He has lights off his port wing, 8 of them, bright red orbs dancing in formation. They shadow his plane for a few minutes, then accelerate at a speed he cannot comprehend. He is a combat veteran. He does not scare easily, but he cannot explain what he just saw. This was not a one-time event. The official records, once sealed, show hundreds of these encounters. Pilots gave them a name: Foo Fighters. Yes, from a comic strip. Because what else do you call something so utterly absurd? The High Command tried to explain it away. Weather phenomena, reflections on the cockpit glass, simple pilot fatigue. But these men knew the sky. They knew the difference between static discharge and an object intelligently maneuvering beside their bomber. The descriptions in the declassified combat logs are chillingly consistent. Small metallic spheres flying in perfect formation. Luminous globes of orange or white that would pace an aircraft for miles and then simply vanish. A report from December 22, 1944, details a fiery orange light that followed a bomber crew for over 20 minutes before it just went out, like a light bulb being switched off. Think about what that means. It didn't fly away, it just ceased to be there. And here's where the official story begins to fray. Allied intelligence believed the Foo Fighters were a radical new German secret weapon, an advanced drone designed to disrupt their bombing raids. It was a logical assumption. It was also completely wrong. Because German pilots were seeing them too. So were the Japanese. Over Germany, they called them Feuerball, fireballs, and they were convinced they were an Allied secret weapon. You have the world's 2 most powerful military forces, each possessing the most advanced technology on Earth, and both are being terrified by a third party they cannot identify, each blaming the other. For over 70 years, that paradox was the end of the story, a curious wartime mystery. But that is no longer true. A series of memos from Project Twinkle, declassified only recently, shows that the Allies didn't just observe these objects. After the war, they tried to shoot one down. The target was a green fireball over New Mexico in 1949. They fired at it. The official report states the object was unaffected. So if they weren't ours and they weren't theirs, what happens when you shoot at them and they don't even notice? And they weren't theirs, what happens when you shoot at them and they don't even notice? This question haunted intelligence agencies for decades. The answer, buried for years, began to surface in the Harz Mountains, specifically within the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the small German town of Nordhausen. Here, deep inside Konstein Mountain, the Nazis had built an underground factory, a vast hidden complex known as Mittelwerk. It was a place of unimaginable suffering, where slave laborers toiled to produce Hitler's V-2 rockets. But after the war, Allied investigators discovered something else there: documents detailing advanced aerospace research. Not just rockets, but propulsion systems that defied conventional understanding. Think about that for a moment. You're expecting blueprints for missiles, but you find designs for something far stranger. One particular file, labeled Project Bell, raised immediate red flags. It described a vertical takeoff and landing craft, not a helicopter, something else entirely. The schematics showed a massive bell-shaped device, approximately 12 to 15 feet in diameter. It was made of heavy, unknown alloys, and its proposed power source? A highly experimental vortex generator. This was not the kind of technology anyone expected from a defeated nation. The official narrative, for a long time, dismissed these documents as theoretical, fantastical even. But consider the source. These were not the musings of a lone inventor. They were detailed engineering plans, meticulously drawn, found within a top-secret Nazi facility. What do you think that implies? Historians often focus on the V2. Its destructive power was undeniable. But the true enigma of Nordhausen was not what was launched into the sky, but what was designed to ascend vertically without a visible exhaust. Allied Scientific Intelligence Officer Major General Hugh J. Nuhr personally oversaw the seizure of these documents. His reports, declassified in 2006, describe his utter bewilderment. He called the findings beyond anything we have ever conceived. This was not a man prone to exaggeration. He was a seasoned military engineer, yet what he saw made him question everything he knew about flight. And here's where it gets interesting. The Bell Project was not an isolated concept. It was tied to other classified research, specifically a secret SS scientific department known as the Sonderbüro 13. This group operated with almost unlimited resources, reporting directly to Heinrich Himmler. They were not interested in incremental improvements to existing technology. They pursued radical, almost esoteric scientific avenues. Their work was compartmentalized, even from other Nazi research divisions. This level of secrecy suggests something truly extraordinary was underway. You rarely see that kind of isolation in wartime research, unless the stakes are incredibly high. The head of Sonderbüro 13 was an SS Obergruppenführer named Hans Kammler, a figure of immense power and chilling ruthlessness. Kammler was responsible for the construction of concentration camps, but also for many of Germany's most advanced weapon projects. He was a master of logistics, capable of moving entire factories underground in a matter of months. And then, at the very end of the war, Kammler vanished. Completely. Officially, he committed suicide. But no body was ever found. No verifiable grave. Just a convenient disappearance. Many believe he was spirited away by the Americans or Soviets. His knowledge was too valuable to simply let him die. But what knowledge exactly? The Bell Project, the vortex generator, the unknown alloys. These were not merely theoretical concepts. Witnesses, interrogated after the war, spoke of test flights, not of conventional aircraft, test flights of the Bell. One such witness was Jakob Sporenberg, a former SS general. Under interrogation by British intelligence in 1946, he described a device that could hover silently and accelerate at incredible rates. He even mentioned a luminous glow emanating from its underside. Read that again. A luminous glow. Does that sound familiar? The Foo Fighters seen by Allied pilots often described the same characteristic. The connection, once dismissed as mere coincidence, now seems far more direct. The official explanation for these witness accounts was often wartime hysteria or propaganda-induced delusion, but multiple independent testimonies, from individuals who had no contact with each other, described strikingly similar details. These were not men who had read comic books about Foo Fighters. They were engineers, scientists, and military personnel. They saw something real, and they were terrified. So, was the Bell Project the origin of the Foo Fighters? Was this terrifying technology, developed in the final desperate days of the Third Reich, actually being deployed against both Allied and Axis forces? And if so, how did a nation on the brink of collapse manage to create something so far beyond the technological capabilities of the time? The answer lies not just in the tunnels of Nordhausen, but in the desperate scramble for scientific secrets that followed the war. A scramble that would change the course of history and leave behind a lingering question. What else did they find? The answer, for many, lay not in what was destroyed, but in what was rescued. Operation Paperclip. This was the covert United States intelligence program that, after 1945, brought over 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians to America. Their expertise was considered too valuable to fall into Soviet hands. Think about that. The very men who designed Hitler's war machine were now working for the Pentagon. The official story focused on rocket scientists like Wernher von Braun. His work was undeniably critical to the space race. But what about the others? What about those whose research strayed into far more unconventional fields? These are the questions that linger. One declassified document, dated 1947, reveals a stark truth. It details the interrogation of a German aerospace engineer, Dr. Hermann Oberth, who openly stated that the Bell project was not theoretical. He claimed to have seen it. Not just blueprints, but the actual craft. You rarely hear this side of the story. Oberth was a respected pioneer, a mentor to von Braun himself. His testimony was not easily dismissed, yet it was buried for decades. How did they manage to create something so advanced? The official narrative insists that Germany, despite its scientific prowess, was still firmly rooted in conventional physics. But what if that wasn't entirely true? What if there were branches of research so obscure, so radical, that they were kept even from the highest levels of the Nazi regime? This is where the story takes a darker turn. Project Kronos, a name whispered among a few researchers, never officially acknowledged. It points to a deep, almost obsessive interest within the SS in ancient technologies and esoteric physics. They weren't just rockets. They were searching for something else, something far older. And here's where it gets unsettling. In 1943, an SS archaeological team excavated ancient texts near the Black Sea. These texts, translated by captured scholars, allegedly contained descriptions of flying chariots and energy manipulation. The details in these translations, now partially declassified, bear an uncanny resemblance to the reported capabilities of the Foo Fighters. Does that sound like a coincidence to you? The official history makes no mention of this. Yet, the documents exist. They describe a propulsion system based on what they called implosion physics, a radical concept that contradicted much of contemporary understanding. This wasn't about burning fuel. It was about manipulating space-time. You have to read the original reports to grasp the sheer audacity of this research. It describes a rotating electromagnetic field that could counteract gravity. This technology, if it existed, would explain the silent hovering and impossible acceleration witnessed by Allied pilots. It would explain everything. But then, it disappeared. The research, the scientists, the translated texts, all vanished. Officially, they were destroyed in the chaos of war. Convenient, isn't it? But some records, painstakingly pieced together from various archives, suggest a different fate. They hint at a desperate attempt by a specific faction within the SS to save this technology. Not for Hitler, but for themselves. Think about what that means. A rogue element possessing power beyond comprehension. This is not just about a weapon, it's about a paradigm shift. One particular memo, dated April 1945, from a British intelligence officer named Major Geoffrey Smith, discusses the movement of unusual cargo from a remote airfield in Czechoslovakia. The cargo was described as 3 large bell-shaped objects. Smith's report was dismissed as speculative. He was even reprimanded. But why? Why silence a decorated officer who was merely reporting what he saw? The very idea of such a technology was deemed impossible, absurd. Yet the sightings continued, not just over Germany, but globally. The green fireballs over New Mexico in 1949. The famous Roswell incident in 1947. These events, often attributed to extraterrestrial visitors, suddenly take on a different context. What if they weren't visitors from another world? What if they were something far more terrestrial and far more terrifying? The implications are immense. What if the Foo Fighters, those mysterious lights in the sky, were not alien at all? What if they were a dark legacy of a war that refused to end? A technology that fell into the wrong hands, or perhaps was never truly controlled at all. A secret kept hidden for decades, not to protect national security, but to protect a far more disturbing truth. And now, you have to wonder, what else are they not telling us? That question echoes through the decades. a silent accusation against official narratives. It points to a disturbing truth. The cost of these secrets wasn't just measured in declassified documents, it was measured in human lives. In 1937, long before the war, a small village nestled in the Black Forest witnessed something extraordinary. It was not a military exercise. It was not a meteor shower. It was something entirely new. You can imagine the quiet life there, the rhythmic sounds of daily chores, the scent of pine needles in the crisp air. Then the sky tore open. Villagers reported a shining disk descending rapidly, emitting a low hum that vibrated through the very ground. It was an object unlike anything they had ever conceived. This was not a Foo Fighter yet. This was before the war. The official German archives contain a brief, almost dismissive report on this incident near Freudenstadt. It attributes the sightings to mass hysteria and unidentified meteorological phenomena. But multiple eyewitness accounts, meticulously gathered by local historians, paint a different picture. They speak of a craft that landed, briefly, before ascending again with impossible speed. Think about that for a moment. A rural community suddenly confronted with technology from another world, or another time. And here's where it gets unsettling. Within weeks of the Freudenstadt sighting, a team from the Ahnenerbe arrived. This was the SS think tank dedicated to researching Aryan racial history and occult sciences. They were not known for their interest in weather balloons. Their presence, documented in local church records and private diaries, immediately raises suspicion. What were they truly investigating? And what did they find? The local police chief, a man named Carl Schmidt, filed a detailed report about the unusual activities of this SS team. He observed them confiscating all photographs, silencing witnesses, and even seizing personal journals. His report, discovered years later in a forgotten municipal archive, makes no mention of mass hysteria. Instead, it describes a systematic cover-up. And now, pay attention to this. Schmidt's report, dated September 1937, concludes with his personal observation. The object was not of this earth. A seasoned law enforcement officer, trained to observe and report facts, came to this astonishing conclusion. His words were officially ignored. You rarely see such a direct personal statement from an official source dismissed so completely. What does that tell you about the power at play? The Ahnenerbe's involvement in the Freudenstadt incident was not a random occurrence. It fits a pattern of obsessive interest in anything that hinted at advanced, non-conventional technology. This was Heinrich Himmler's pet project. He genuinely believed that ancient Aryan knowledge held the key to unlocking new powers. And these flying chariots from ancient texts? They were not just mythology to him. They were blueprints. One of the witnesses to the Freudenstadt landing was a young boy named Klaus Richter. He was 8 years old. He saw the object from his bedroom window. He later drew detailed sketches of what he called the silver egg. His drawings, preserved by his family, show remarkable consistency with later descriptions of the Bell project. His story, once dismissed as childhood fantasy, now takes on a chilling significance. He described men in strange uniforms, not German soldiers, examining the craft. Then, they were gone. His family was threatened. His father lost his job. The personal cost was immediate and severe. These were not abstract theories. These were lives shattered. The silence imposed on the villagers of Freudenstadt was absolute. For decades, they spoke only in whispers. They knew what they saw. They knew what was taken from them. But who would believe them? And here's the part nobody talks about. The Freudenstadt incident was not an isolated event. There were other reports, other disappearances, other systematic silencing efforts, all pointing to a covert Nazi interest in advanced aerial phenomena, predating the war by years. This was not just about weapons. It was about understanding a technology that could fundamentally alter human history, a technology they stumbled upon, perhaps accidentally, in the quiet depths of the Black Forest. And then, they tried to control it. You have to wonder what happened to those who refused to be silenced. What happened to those who saw too much? The truth, it seems, can be a very dangerous thing indeed. I can be a dangerous thing. But a far more effective weapon is ridicule. For every witness silenced by a threat, 100 more were silenced by laughter. This became the new doctrine. Think about it. It's much easier to make someone a fool than a martyr. The official policy shifted from denial to dismissal, and its chief architect was a man who, ironically, would later seek redemption, Dr. J. Allen Hynek. An astronomer hired by the U.S. Air Force for Project Blue Book, its official study of UFOs. His job was simple: explain it all away. And for years, he did. He attributed sightings to weather balloons, temperature inversions, even swamp gas. Yes, he actually said that in 1966 after a major sighting in Michigan. But Hynek saw too much. The official files contained a residue of cases, over 700 of them, that defied every rational explanation. These were the unknowns. The reports filed by military pilots, police officers, and scientists that were simply too credible to ignore. These were the files they never wanted to discuss. Hynek, the professional debunker, changed. The weight of the evidence became too much to bear. He later confessed that Project Blue Book was a public relations exercise, designed not to investigate, but to pacify. And now, think about what that really means. The government wasn't just hiding evidence of strange objects in the sky. It was actively manipulating public perception, using science itself as a tool for disbelief. But the legacy of the war wasn't just a collection of censored files and broken careers. It was also a matter of hardware. What happened to the technology, to the Bell Project, to the research from Sonderbureau 13? Did it all just vanish with Hans Kammler? The documents from Operation Paperclip show that hundreds of German aerospace engineers were integrated into American defense contractors. Bell Aircraft, the very company that would later build experimental vertical takeoff craft, received its share of this expertise. Coincidence? Perhaps. But look at the sky today. Look at the B-2 Spirit bomber. A flying wing, an echo of the Horton brothers' designs from the 1940s. A craft that appears on radar as no larger than a bird. The official timeline of aviation shows a steady progression. But these wartime files suggest something else. A sudden, quantum leap in understanding. A secret history of technology running parallel to our own. This leaves us with a profound and unsettling question. For 80 years, we have looked to the stars for the source of these mysteries. We have imagined visitors from other worlds, crossing unimaginable distances. But what if we've been looking in the wrong direction? What if the strangest revelation is not that we have been visited, but what we ourselves are capable of? If this technology was not a gift from the heavens, but a secret we have kept from ourselves, then what other truths about our own potential have we chosen to forget?